And obviously you can edit out my deep thinking because
Nope.
I'm not Grok.
As in, you're not a Nazi.
Who will save the West? Well, it has to be Adolf Hitler. A marginal extent to which parents can make any difference, and it's certainly not playing Mozart to you in the room or having books all over the house. I think it's all true, but I don't know whether it had a very benign effect on my parenting skills, but I couldn't persuade my wife this was the case, and so we were sort of at odds. I was like, he doesn't need that. You don't need to do that the whole time. And now I look back and I think, would it have been better if I'd been more enthusiastically thinking, I can help them? You know?
Yeah.
Maybe that would have been better rather than going, well, there's nothing I can do. So we had to get back. So we split up. I got a lift in a 928 Porsche and Ross got a lift in a truck, which managed to crash into one of the crash barriers on these mountain roads. And when they got out to inspect the damage, the driver took the opportunity to molest him.
Hello and welcome to Francis Foster Sorts Your Life Out, the show where I indeed sort your life out. Bear in mind, I'm no type of therapist or any of that stuff, but I bring on a guest every week. And this week, I'm delighted to have one of the best. It's Simon Evans. How are you?
I had no idea that was the nature of the show, that you were going to sort my life out.
I'm not going to sort your life out. You're going to sort people's lives out.
Oh, I'm going to help you with them.
Yes.
Okay, got it. Only last night on GB News, I was mocking Greg Wallace for having set himself up as a life coach. Less than 24 hours later, here I am.
Yeah. Well, there's a lesson in there, isn't there?
Yeah, there is actually. Yeah, I constantly do that to myself.
Yeah. But thank you, first of all, for doing the necessary research of the show.
Well, you know what people say, do you want to be on my podcast? You know, the answer is yes, isn't it? I am a yes and. I'm a builder. Not a negger.
So you're a podcast slut?
I am, basically, yeah. Unless I've heard really bad things.
Yeah.
No. So far, you're fine.
What do you mean really bad things? You've appeared on GB News for the last 3 years.
I have, yeah. 3.5.
3.5
Getting
years?
on for 4. I'm going to limp my way to the 4-year line before the contract ends. Yeah.
4 years you've been at GB.
I know, it's incredible, isn't it?
Yeah.
I've gone grey. I've lost my hair.
Have you loved every moment of it?
Do you know what? I have not unloved it. It's been fine. And considering it is like a job, it's the first PAYE contract I've had since I was 22, I think. So, yeah, I can't complain, actually. It's been lovely. It's got me out of the house, you know.
Yeah.
It's given me a bit of structure to my week.
Nice.
Yeah.
And lovely. And you were there digesting the news with...
Well, that part I didn't love. The relentlessness of the news, because it never bloody stops, does it? And that is odd, actually, because although I have, I've made topical commentary of one kind or another on Spiked, they usually would just sort of fillet a quirky story for me to, analyse. It's been quite some time since I felt it necessary to actually keep up with the news on a weekly basis. You do the Radio 4 news quiz occasionally or whatever, and you scour the news that week and you get yourself back up to speed. But staying on top of it for 4 years straight has actually been absolutely exhausting and quite stressful, because most of the news, obviously, by its very nature, is bad. So there is a certain amount of wear and tear from that I might not miss.
Yeah. So you're looking forward my
retirement.
Taking a step back and disconnecting.
Well, moving into more, I've always thought of myself, like my colleague Nick Dixon is same, you get drawn into the news because obviously, as you know, with Triggernometry, it's what sells. People like to, you get traction with what's happening right now. But it is, as somebody said years ago, like trying to read the time by watching the second hand. It's not the healthiest way to try and understand the world, actually.
No, it's not.
And I'm much more interested in the sort of understanding, the sort of deep grasp of human nature that comes from great literature and drama and paintings and, the old arts, as it were, rather than the constant sort of clatter of keys.
I do know what you mean. The fact Look, news. It just seems that, particularly with the advent of social media, that news has just been ramping up in speed.
Yeah.
So
well,
I mean,
you shift more copies by being more doom laden than the next man, don't you? You know, that's what gets people's attention. You know, all those. I'm sure this one will have one. All those podcasts that. And like Andrew Gold is very good as well, like TRIGGERnometry, you know, they always have to have we have 5 minutes left, you know. You've run out of time, you're past it, it's gone, it's happened, you know, we're already over the edge.
Yeah.
I don't know, I've heard that a lot over the course of my 78 years on the planet, Francis. I've got to say, Del Boy, it's not always the case.
That is very true. It's a very good point to make, and I think it's something to bear in mind.
Well, I read, just as a for instance, and this just popped in my head, but I was in Helsinki last week, as you know, but the viewer/listener won't. And then we had an apartment Airbnb over a second-hand bookshop, so I got into the habit of dropping in there because I like them as you know, and I like to support that sort of thing. And he had an English language section, so for that reason, I found myself browsing Neil Ferguson. You probably had Neil Ferguson
we've had
on
him
your
a few
show,
times.
haven't you? Yeah. His book Colossus, The Rise and Fall of the American Empire, which he wrote, or at least the hardback was published in 2004. And he was basically predicting the end of America right there, the fiscal crisis. This was before the 2008 crash. He's saying the fiscal crisis, which is looming, is unavoidable catastrophe. The usual thing, you know, social security and the Ponzi scheme that every Western country, you know, has tried to create with paying pensions from a diminishing work stock. And he was saying it's like, you know, counting it down, might last a few more years, could be any moment now. Well, you know, the S&P 500, you'd have done pretty well if you'd have started backing that in 2008 and just stuck with it, you know. So, yeah, doom is a mug's game, I've decided.
Fair enough. It's a good point. Well made. But moving on to the queries from our audience, we have some queries, and they want you to sort their problems out.
Oh, okay. So they come up on a screen, and I analyse and ponder, and obviously you can edit out my deep thinking.
No,
because I'm not Grok, you know.
As in, you're not a Nazi.
You see the little 3 dots wrinkling over. Wow, that was incredible, wasn't it? What a wild ride that was. Who will save the West? Well, it has to be Adolf Hitler. And the bit where he was beasting poor Will Stancil, I almost felt sorry for the sack. Shall I read it out? Or you want to read it out?
I'll read it out. Dear Francis, my neighbour has 5 Ring doorbells covering every angle of his semi. He says it's just in case.
Is it deliberately riddled with innuendo, or is that just...
It's how we like it. We know that as a man who used to write pornography. You
want to see every angle of a semi.
Yeah.
Some of them will be more flattering than others.
Yeah, exactly. Which is why you need all angles. Some will be flattering and some will just be brutally realistic. I haven't seen him smile in 3 years. Has safety made us weird?
It's interesting. So ring is obviously capitalised. 5 ring is an interesting phrase because that's the legend of the 5 rings is one of the ancient Chinese texts. I haven't read it, so I'm not going to go very deep into that. That's sort of their Iliad or something, I believe. Anyway, 5 Ring doorbells. They're the ones with a little constantly on camera, aren't they? I called round to my neighbours next door to my parents recently. I've got very elderly parents on a cul-de-sac in Norfolk. Rang the doorbell and the voice answered, and he was 15 miles away at work. It's quite a weird experience. He's got me on his mobile phone and he can see me there. I was just popping round to see if I could borrow a lawnmower or something, you know, and I don't know, I find it all a bit dystopian, a bit strange. I don't know, but maybe that's just me creaking. I think safety has made us weird, yeah. I think it is best not to know. We have a thing called Live 360, I think it's called, on our smartphones, my wife and I, and our son has taken himself off it. But I can basically, if you're logged onto it, you can see where everyone is at any given moment. I can watch my wife walking the dog. I know if she is not actually walking the dog, but has in fact met a friend for a coffee. And I can see whether she's in one of the shops that promotes the pastries. It's like, before you know it, you're like watching everybody else's behaviour and wondering whether you need to intervene. You know, it's terrible, really bad. I went away. Our son turns 18 in a couple of weeks, and he's on holiday with his mates. And Kate, my wife, is like constantly wants to know if he's all right. I'm like, I went away for 6 weeks in my A-level summer. to Europe, hitchhiking, sleeping rough most nights, like in Marseille train station, watching other people's knives being sliced open by robbers, other people's sleeping bags.
Yeah.
And I didn't so much as write her a postcard, I don't think. The whole time I was out there, my mum, not Kate, I didn't know her at that point. And now we're expecting to have 24-hour coverage of, ring doorbells maybe if he lives in a rough area, but it's a semi, so it sounds all right, doesn't it? Yeah. The fact that he's got a side passage.
I think it's a profound point you make, that what happened to a little bit of mystery? Do you want to know everything about your son or your daughter? There are some things, now that your son is an adult, that should remain private.
Absolutely correct. I try and stay back, but the trouble is, it's like there's probably a word for this phenomenon where if we can't agree, my wife and I, we can agree to disagree about the degree of surveillance and constant sort of updates that's appropriate. That means she will demand those, and that means he doesn't get the private life. Do you know what I mean? I can't enforce it. That you can remove one person, but the it's like the drop of oil in the glass of water. That's it. It's gone. So it's it's a problem. I think it is. And for those of us who feel that freedom, spontaneity, independence are important, we are. We don't have the heckler's veto. That's the trouble, in that regard. So it's a tricky one. And I would say your friend, it would take a deep. It depends whether he's seen anything through his Ring doorbells. If he has seen masked villains, lurking around. We have a dog. Maybe that would be a better solution for him. Get a dog, that he trusts to perform a deterrent.
Do you remember when you used to go out with your mates? And this was, we
were talking black and white here.
But pre-mobile phone, you just went out, and no one knew where you went.
Yeah.
They were like, "Oh, where's Simon gone?" They'd be like, "Oh, he went out."
Again, when I went hitchhiking with my mate Ross, that summer, 6 weeks in Europe, we had no means of contact. On occasion, we'd have to split up because you wouldn't get a lift. Two blokes together, on the side of the road. Yeah. So if it was time, there was one occasion, this genuinely happened. I wasn't planning to tell this story, but we'd gone up to the Alps. It was the summertime, so it was a sort of summer a ski resort during the summer, and it wasn't much fun, so we decided to get back down. We'd left our luggage in a left luggage locker in Nice station, and it was timed, so it was going to spring open. That's how they made sure you didn't overstay your welcome. So the thing would just pop open, and that would be that. So we had to get back. So we split up. I got a lift in a 928 Porsche from some sort of like high rolling, I don't know, individual who was, had been up to inspect his ski lodge and was going back down to the Côte d'Azur where he was summering. And Ross got a lift in a truck, which managed to crash into one of the crash barriers on these mountain roads. And when they got out to inspect the damage, the driver took the opportunity to molest him. But we still managed to get back in time and met back at the left luggage office. But insane. Incredible. But this is the thing, everything like that ratchets. It'd be difficult for our kids now to go out without their phones, and for them to feel like, well, how can you meet if you don't have a phone? Well, you say when you're going to meet someone, and then you do, or if you don't, you'll quickly get a reputation as somebody that's you can't be trusted,
Yeah, you would identify. I love the fact that we've just skipped over the fact that your mate got molested.
It was all right. He didn't. He fought it off, but he tried it on. Let's say that he tried it on.
Do you know what? I find that so interesting because when I was a kid, you knew who the creepy teachers were.
Yeah.
You just knew who they were, and you avoided them. My
mate Danny, he won't mind me saying him by name, Danny Solomon. He was at St Paul's School, posh public school in Hammersmith, and one of their teachers was one of the famous sort of historical sex offences that they decided to go for because they'd failed to catch Savile, while he was still a living, breathing villain. And all his mates have been saying about it. Well, we all knew, you just said you don't find yourself alone in the art stock room with him, I mean, he managed to get away. But yeah, exactly. We didn't have anyone at my school, but we were in a grammar stroke comprehensive, so you didn't get that class of money. You had to pay money for those. I felt sorry for one. There was one, I wish I could remember his name, because I keep trying to remember it on Wikipedia again. It was a fascinating story. He was a master at Eton who was one of those like legendary Victorian masters who people said he made my life, he awoke in me a love of literature or whatever
poetry,
it was, yeah. And then a rumour started to sort of circulate around him, and he sort of resigned in disgrace, and I think possibly took his life, I'm not sure, but it was really tragic and horrible story, because for 30 years he'd just been this incredible pedagogue, but also a pederast. And I just think in those days there was possibly something that would... I mean, why else would you like dedicate your life to spending your time with 15-year-old boys?
Yeah.
If you were a gifted man of letters, you could possibly have at least been a Don at Cambridge, if not also a published author. But there was it would be inevitable that there was some element in your character that drew. But I don't think there was no. He had not actually, captured a boy and held him. I mean, that happens occasionally as well. You do hear about that, but it was just a slightly, was caught gazing wistfully at Williams Major, hanging around the boatyard a bit more often than his particular duties would suggest was necessary.
Do you know, as far as answers go, I think we've covered everything.
We've got time for one more.
Yeah, we've got time for one more. We went from a doorbell ringing right the way through to a teacher resigning in disgrace because of alleged...
If any of your listeners recognise that story and can let me know which who that man was, he was famous. He has his own Wikipedia page, and the chapter on his disgrace is only one of many in his accomplishments.
Really?
Yeah, I think he maybe taught Gladstone or somebody. He was.
Wow.
He was a serious. The most famous one was the head of rugby, wasn't he? Was the the guy who came up with the phrase "sweetness and light" in discussing what great culture and art should sort of imbue with Matthew Arnold. I think it was his father. Something Arnold was the headmaster at rugby, who sort of, even though Eton was the more famous school, he had sort of created the ethos of the English public school, or the aspect of it that wasn't just about turning out empire management skills, which was a huge part of the English public school system, was essentially, running the colonies.
Yeah, absolutely, as it should be.
Yeah.
So has society safety made us weird? Yes, but also this conversation has made me weird as well. Next. Right, let's talk about grooming. Not that kind, the proper kind. If you want to tidy things up downstairs without looking like you've lost a fight with a hedge trimmer, the new Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra in the white hot edition is the tool for the job. It's got skin-safe technology, dual blades, and even a light, because shaving your crown jewels in the dark is a terrible idea. Trust me, I've done it. Ooh, not good. It's waterproof too, so I can sort myself out in the shower and pretend I've got my life together. Of course I have. Look at me. Plus, the white and gold design, very slick. Looks like it belongs in James Bond's toiletry bag. There's a reason we've been working with Manscaped for 3 years now. Because they pay us. Of course they do. They're reliable like that. No, because they're the best. The quality of their products and customer service standards are second to none. Go to manscaped.com and use code TRIGGER15 for 15% off your entire order. That's TRIGGER15 at manscaped.com. Trim like a gent, look like you meant it. Doesn't even rhyme. Dear Francis, my new manager starts every meeting with a breathing exercise and ends it with a quote. Meanwhile, my inbox is on fire. Is this mindfulness or just distraction with a moral glow?
Well, it depends how many meetings he's forcing you to have if he's having one every morning and it lasts 2 hours, then it's probably not the best use of your time. But that's not a bad thing to introduce into the workplace. Breathing exercise for 5 minutes, and it is a good way to de-stress. I learned about this quite recently. There that Huberman chap talks about it on the internet, but also there's a more well-established insight that if you breathe in hard and breathe out slowly, that wakes you up. And if you do the reverse, it actually helps you to sleep. If you want to have an afternoon nap and you want to make that an efficient thing, which I personally do find is great, 20 minutes of actually sort of dropping out entirely. So you go 7 or 8 seconds with empty lungs, and before you breathe in again. Wim Hof talks about this as well, or Wim Hof. It's fantastic. It's really effective. Breathing exercise is a very powerful, simple way, and obviously, the least downsides imaginable by comparison with using drugs or interventions of that kind. So yeah, I think it's good, and I love quotes, as you've probably noticed. I'm a big man for quotes, and I like slightly older quotes, from unusual places as well, not necessarily the latest, a quote from, Andrew Tate. If you dig a little deeper, you can find, though old the thought and oft expressed, is his at last who says it best. There you go. There's an actual quote about quotes.
Yeah, that's interesting. You know who gives the best quotes?
Kipling. Shakespeare, they are great, yeah.
Neither a borrower nor a lender be.
Well, there's a great example. They're best understood in context. That's Polonius, who is droning on to Hamlet in that. To
Laertes, his son, yeah.
Laertes, who is he's considered to be a pompous old fool, isn't he?
Yes.
Polonius, and yet there are insights in that speech which are quite valuable. So it's an odd. Yeah, it's interesting to get the context of them.
Yeah, and Polonius does dispense a lot of wisdom in his speeches.
He's not that great with Ophelia, though, is he?
No, he's not. He's not.
Ophelia, which is one of the great innuendos.
He's not that great with Ophelia, but you know what? No one's good at everything.
You're right, yeah. And sometimes people who are good at quotes and insights and not so great. I mean, he's risen to the top in the court, I suppose, and he's an old man who should probably just retired a couple of years earlier.
Yeah.
But gets stabbed in the arse, doesn't he?
He does. He does. So I like the one where he talks about...
through the arse, I should say.
I like the quote he says where... he talks about friendship, and it's just basically like, if you have tested somebody's friendship and found it to be true, you know that is a very rare person, and you must tie, I can't remember, hoops to them.
Bind yourself to them,
yeah, all of that.
Nice.
Yeah, so Polonius, underrated. I mean, Hamlet hated him, but then Hamlet was a miserable prick.
Hamlet is an endlessly fascinating character, isn't he? Harold Bloom says he is, by some considerable distance, the most intelligent man ever written for, as it were, ever created. And he wrote whole books about him and how his soliloquies invented what it is to be human. It's quite a lot to be drawn out of Hamlet. My son studied Hamlet at A-level, and I think it's fair to say did not fully exhaust the subject. But we had some interesting conversations.
Oh, I love it's my favourite play, Hamlet.
Yeah.
You read his soliloquies and you go, oh, this is also talking about depression.
Oh, yeah. Well, he acknowledges the inner life. He's the first character in his soliloquies to really acknowledge that we have inner lives and inner... I mean, it is the inner monologue, which has been a discussion on the internet, isn't it, recently? Because apparently not everyone has one. But perhaps reading Hamlet is what you need to awaken yours.
Yes.
To go, do you know what? I think that sometimes, although I wouldn't put it quite like that. But yeah, he's amazing. Well, you should read Harold Bloom if you haven't done before, because that will obviously indulge your love of the subject. Yeah.
No, I love literature. I don't read enough, and that is something
none of us do. Audiobook has been the absolute silver bullet for me. I get through far more great text through my ears now than through my eyes. I find reading actually soporific. Luckily, I got quite a lot done before it started to happen. But yeah.
I completely understand that. I think social media, I know social media has ruined it.
So anyway, let's just say your new manager is onto something as long as the meetings themselves don't last too long. And if your inbox is on fire, that's on you. You need a bit more information management, system management there.
Perfect. Thank you. Dear Francis, I told a mate I'd stop believing in free will. He said that's why I never get anything done. Can philosophy just be laziness in better language? There is a very famous, I think he's a philosopher or maybe a neuroscientist called Robert Sapolsky, who, do you know Robert Sapolsky?
He's a baboon watcher, isn't he? Yeah.
And he's one of the people who proposes the theory that there is no such thing as free will, as does Sam Harris, actually. But anyway, we digress.
I have read Sam Harris's work on it, and I started Sapolsky's one, but I didn't like it. But... yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those questions. It's a bit like, are we living in a simulation?
Yeah.
And you get to a point where you go, well, what difference does it make to how I actually live my life? Well, if the difference it's made is the sense that there's no point in trying anymore or doing anything because you'll just do, then obviously it's had an impact and it's not a good one. It's not a benign one. I think a lot of philosophies you should judge by whether or not, like existentialism can lead to just, angst and despair. I like a chap called Colin Wilson, who was predominantly, funny enough, I literally was listening to one in reception of his, The Outsider, which was his first book, but he developed his thoughts through the 60s and 70s. Positive existentialism. Existentialism, there is no God, you create your own meaning, but you can do this in a much more upbeat and sort of happy and lively way than is suggested by Camus and Sartre and so on. So in that same way, if you believe there's no such thing as free will, but you may as well play along with the illusion, then it's fine. If it makes you think that you're just going to end up sitting there like a sack of spuds, then obviously it's not great. It's a similar problem I encountered a few years ago. I think pretty convincing evidence, a book by Robert Plomin called Blueprint, that an enormous degree of your educational outcomes, for instance, are basically like genetics, yeah, and that there's a marginal extent to which parents can make any difference, and it's certainly not playing Mozart to you in the womb or having books all over the house. Having books all over the house is likely to be a side effect of you having passed good genetics onto your children. I think it's all true, but I don't know whether it had a very benign effect on my parenting skills, because I relaxed about parenting as a result, but I couldn't persuade my wife this was the case. And so we were sort of at odds. I was like, he doesn't need that. You don't need to do that the whole time. You don't need to constantly give them this, that you're true to, and all the rest of it. If their intelligence will win out, they'll find the things that they're interested in, and they. And now I look back and I think, would it have been better if I'd been more enthusiastically thinking, I can help them? Maybe that would have been better, rather than going, well, there's nothing I can do. It's all a waste of time.
But I do think there is something to be said for that, though. I think sometimes, I remember when I was teaching, I used to see these kids being hothoused, and they were going from tutor to whatever else. And I'm going,
this is it. There is always, as Aristotle says, there is always the high and narrow path between the two chasms on either side, and that is, I think hot housing and all that sort of business is definitely one of the chasms. But also equally, not even bothering to wake them up in the morning to make sure they get into school on time is probably not that great either.
No, but a large part of it does come. Look, hard work, application, all the rest of it, of course. Yeah. But you need the minerals.
You need the minerals, and you also need the belief that you have the ability to carve your own destiny. And that's where free will can be problematic if you just cave in on that, because it's a mysterious process. Clearly, nobody has really worked it out yet, and it goes back 2,500 years. The question to whether we are actually in charge, whether we are. Jonathan Haidt, who comes up an awful lot in, I think, probably you conversations you've had in the past and stuff, and his great book, The Happiness Hypothesis, he talks about understanding yourself as an elephant and a rider, and obviously if the elephant wants to go charging off in any particular direction, no human rider is able to, steer it. So you have to work on your inner elephant. So you have the capacity to make it changes to yourself that make your elephant more likely to go in the right direction of its own accord, rather than trying to use in the same, like, basically don't go into that cafe that I've watched you on Live 360 and sit there surrounded by tasty pastries, because I know your free will sooner or later cave in.
Yeah, and that's quite a profound point. Like, I know I'm not good around pastries, therefore I avoid the tasty cafe.
Don't let them into the house. It's so much easier to say no once in the shop than to say no every single time you go into the kitchen.
Yeah, and you see them and they're just there glistening in the corner.
We both know, Francis, I'm getting eaten. So why don't we just get it over and done with?
Exactly.
Then we can reset the clock and start again.
Oh, yeah, that is so true. That is so true. Yes, and my argument, I think philosophy can be laziness in better language. I just think, look.
Philosophy is a lovely hobby, but it won't actually change your life in the way that, for instance, lifting weights or improving your diet will.
No.
I think it's interesting conversation. Some philosophy is written well. I mean, Schopenhauer could have been a stand-up comedian, probably Nietzsche as well, some Kierkegaard. But there's no need to slog your way through Hegel. To be honest, life is too short.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. That's true. I completely agree. Dear Francis, my neighbour left a passive-aggressive note about our recycling not being rinsed properly. Then he hosted a barbecue with paper plates and disposable cups. Do I point out the hypocrisy, or is that just the social contract now? Yeah,
I hate that kind of... I mean, I don't know this particular neighbour, obviously, and they sound annoying, but on the other hand, a degree of hypocrisy and biting your tongue is necessary to keep any kind of neighbourhood smooth, isn't it?
Enough to it's every relationship smooth.
Yeah. But hypocrisy in terms of ecological use. We were on the last night of our trip to Helsinki. I treated my wife to one of these restaurants where they do a tasting menu. Where she loves the tasting menu.
Of course she does. She's a lady of taste.
Well, I do think the ladies like it when the staff are constantly like hovering around you and offering suggestions and information as much as the food. It's like the sense of being administered to.
Do you know what I think? Women have an innate just understanding, even if they don't really. They're not aware of it, of what is expensive and what isn't.
True.
And they always gravitate towards the most expensive thing.
It's so true. And I can't see the difference very often. I remember even though when Matilda was 8 and Edward was 5 maybe, and we used to go to a place called Mirepoix in France. My in-laws had a little house in sort of rural France down there. And it was a lovely old sort of medieval place with overhanging eaves and everything. And they had a very old-fashioned merry-go-round in the middle of the town. And all the parents liked to put their children on it and see them on it, you know. And it was... But, of course, once you're on it, it's not really... And to kids, the fact that it's old-fashioned doesn't mean anything. To us, it's sort of a nice, we're back in the 1850s. But I always was aware that Matilda loved sitting on the horse and that Edward always looked bored. And I might be just projecting, but I think she enjoyed the fact of knowing she was being looked at and treasured.
Yeah.
She enjoyed being treasured, and we were treasuring her because she looked delightful going around this thing. And Edward looked sort of sulky and sort of slumped. And I think that is a female trait. They like, and why shouldn't they? If that's the thing, men have equally irrational things. We enjoy being or doing or fantasizing that we're being competent or whatever. Anyway, I think a lot of the tasting menu experience is that. But what annoyed me was that this restaurant positioned itself as ecologically sound. So even though we were paying about 100 quid a head for the food, your knife and fork, they had this something made out of recycled plastic or whatever. Even the glasses were like sawn off bottles, smoothed edges, nicely done, but still that's what they were. And then there was this little sort of, I don't know, holster or whatever that sat on the table that you put your knife and fork on between courses. So you weren't brought a new knife and fork each time. And this was supposedly like to cut down on, use of detergent or whatever. And I didn't resist it. I played along, but a part of me was thinking, I'm paying 100 quid a head. I expect to have a clean knife. I don't want to have to sort of suck off all the bits of gravy off the last course.
Do you know what? Do you know what really gets on my tits? And it's a hack topic and it's a hack observation, but it really paper straws. Is this how we're going to save the world?
It's iconic, isn't it? In its futile symbolism, Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah, and you don't even need to point to the coal-fired power station opening in China every 5 minutes. everything renders a paper straw. It's not fit for purpose.
No.
If it was fit for purpose, like a nice, well-made paper bag with like a carrier bag, if it's good, strong handles and everything, I quite like those. That's all right. That's fine, rather than the nasty plastic ones that end up in trees. But no, the straw thing, it was almost designed to demoralise, wasn't it? That's the thing. If you feel that you're being deliberately demoralised, then paper plates at barbecues are rubbish as well. That's another annoying thing. They fold in the hand. You're always holding your plate with one hand, right? And it's the worst place to use a paper plate. You'd be better off using paper plates at night and having decent crockery for the barbecue.
I quite agree. And then they always become sodden at one point.
Yeah. And melamine is the correct substance, like in a 1950s American cookout. That's what you want. Melamine? It's like Bakelite. It's an old-fashioned. Right. I don't even know if it is plastic, but it's it shatters.
Yes.
Yeah. You want something that's breakable just enough.
You do. You absolutely do. Do I point out the hypocrisy? Because you must see a lot of this hypocrisy because you live near Brighton.
Yeah.
And Brighton is filled with this hypocrisy.
It is absolutely correct. Yeah. In our little stretch of houses, I'm pleased to say we don't have any troublesome neighbours. Although, as I've obviously indicated, if we did, I wouldn't identify them anyway. But no, we're a pretty good bunch. But yeah, I mean, we've actually, I think it's a Labour-run council at the moment, but it has been Green, and both of them are as bad as each other. We had a Green council for a while, and as a consequence, they were held to ransom by the refuse collection people, and there was a bin strike for about a fortnight. And none of us have bins anymore. We don't have personal wheelie bins. We have a massive trunk bin every 6 or 7 houses. Actually, more than that. I think it's a good 10 houses walkaways. I mean, it was just overflowing with filth, used nappies and tea bags and stuff. And it was places full of seagulls and foxes. It was third world. It was absolutely disgraceful. And this was exactly because of a Green council.
But you know what it is? That is a microcosm of, and a perfect summation of demented left-wing politics.
It absolutely is. I cannot see how these people, the good people of New York City, are going to turn their place into, no offence, Venezuela, aren't they?
Yeah. It is. Well, a lot of them are fat and they need to lose weight.
That will be a side effect. That will be an upside, yeah.
Yeah, I remember one of my uncles he was a Chavista, so he was a big fan of Hugo Chavez.
Right.
Always used to lecture me. I never really liked him. He was a prick. And he
Chavez or the uncle?
Both of them, but
okay.
my uncle.
Yeah.
And he always moaned that he couldn't lose weight as he was big boned. Anyway, he voted Chavez in.
And he lost weight.
Amazing. Yeah.
No wonder he's the hero.
Yeah, exactly. Turns out he could lose weight. And actually, say what you like about Chavez, cured his diabetes.
Yeah. Well, I will say this. If you live in South America, there's a long and arguably proud history of left-wing politics overthrowing genuine tyranny, right? Yeah. You go back to Bolivar or whatever. You can see that there's a bit of a hero. There's no record of that in America, and there's never been a time where Britain was improved by left-wing politics. Perhaps arguably for about 3 years in 1947. But even that's starting to creak now, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. Brighton, yeah. I like Brighton, and I like it down there, and there's the aspects of it that I really like. It does grind on my.
The reason it's bearable, and it has held up fairly well, we all know the country has just not bounced back since the great crash of 2008, compared, for instance, to America. We're grinding along, barely seeing any sort of growth at all. The reason Brighton and Hove is relatively unscathed is nothing to do with the politics. It's because rich people live there.
Yeah.
There's a lot of wealthy people there. Most of them commute to London and work in the city. It's got a decent train line straight to London Bridge. That's why it's all right, and that's why they can indulge all the nonsense.
It is fantastic stuff. Is that it, Jackie? Or we got time for one more? We got time for one more. Dear Francis, I've started using self-checkouts even when there's no queue, not because it's quicker, but because I don't want to talk. Am I becoming antisocial or just efficient?
Well, I think that's forgivable. And if you're somebody who doesn't like small talk, I think that's absolutely fine. And I think those checkouts are there primarily for that kind of thing. I will also say in the Tesco Express near us, where the self-service checkouts, if there's no queue, then the cashier isn't there anyway. Or he is expected to be stacking shelves and so on. They're all multi-purpose economic units. And so it's not like if you were watching an old lady sitting by the till waiting for her opportunity to discuss the weather and you've decided instead to go to the self-service, that might arguably be a tiny bit antisocial, but that isn't usually how it pans out anyway, is it?
No.
I think it's reasonable. And they are pretty good, aren't they? I do find it slightly odd that in the M&S in the station, for instance, there's usually about 8 self-service tills and they have a couple of people standing there sort of directing you towards the next free one. It's as if that isn't really necessary, but it's as if they can't quite let it go. Somebody told me the other day that they'd invested in a chatbot type, platform that was for therapy and analysis, and this is going to be huge. This is already the number one purpose for what people use ChatGPT and stuff for. They said this one has been particularly tailored and groomed and trained to do this work, but they're saying that it is... it's used in consort with a therapist. So it helps the therapist. It speeds up the process. It's all done online, which apparently people find preferable to working with a human therapist, because there are all kinds of downsides to if you don't physically like your therapist. If you look at them and find yourself judging them for their shoes or their knitwear or whatever, then you trust and you're more inclined to trust. But he said it really doesn't need any human intervention at all. It's absolutely fine. It works perfectly well, but they sort of don't want to frighten the horses, So they're introducing it as an aid to help therapists work more efficiently online. The therapist is just going to wither and die and fall off in due course, and that will be that. In the same way that, driverless trains would we could easily have them now, and ASLEF still insist you have a guard to make people don't fall down through the cracks. Absolutely tragic, yeah.
Yeah, am I becoming antisocial? The one thing I don't like about self-service checkouts, and this is my conspiracy theory, and I don't think it's a conspiracy theory.
No, go on.
I think they're getting rid of cash. And I think the checkout is one of the ways they're helping to do that. Yeah. Because notice this, every time you go to a checkout, how many of them accept cash? Most of them don't.
No, you're right. No, that is definitely a trend. And I mean, it's futile to try and resist it at this point. But obviously in the stand-up game, that used to be lovely to get, a nice little wad of cash at the end of the night.
You were a Comedy Store headliner back in the day where Don would shuffle up to you at the end of the weekend, go, Simon, here's a little envelope with all your dough in it.
Saturday night, you get the Thursday, the double Friday, and the double Saturday all given to you on the Saturday night.
Oh, well,
and
then
you could also double with the banana, which was also a double head. So you'd open at the Comedy Store, down to Balham, open one room, close the second room in Balham, and then come back for the late show in the Comedy Store.
How much would you get?
Well, just Saturday night alone was about £800 then. all in crisp 10s and 20s, yeah.
800 nicker.
Yeah, and then you'd walk home looking as innocent as you could, but just about feeling safe.
I bet you had a little spring in your step, didn't you?
Fantastic. But yeah, it's very sad. I have to get cash out now and send it recorded delivery to my parents in Norfolk because they need cash to pay the cleaners and stuff, and their gardener. They're both really elderly, know, and they can't get out at all. But even if they can, all the banks and stuff have shut in their local villages. It's and it is. It's definitely it's a huge benefit to the HMRC, and there's a nice little learner for all the banks and everything, and something is being lost. I had my wallet nicked a couple of years ago, and while I was waiting for new cards to arrive, I had some cash, and I found the pubs wouldn't take it. Yeah, pubs in the West End wouldn't take cash.
Do you know? I remember I've never had money. Really, I've always grew up skint. Parents always struggled for money, blah, blah, blah. And then TRIGGERnometry took off, got a little bit of money, and I was like, I've got a little bit of dough now. And I remember I was in the West End.
Yeah.
And my card didn't work for whatever reason.
Historical.
And the Apple Pay wouldn't work on my phone, and I was just stranded.
Yeah.
It didn't matter that I had it for the first of my mind, but just a tiny bit of dough.
Yeah, and now and you're being denied even so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was just like, well, that's it. You cannot engage with society. It's actually terrifying.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
You can be shut out of society like that.
Yeah, and it is going to be used to do that to people,
Yeah.
And yet there's this other part of me, and the biometric ID cards and everything else that are coming in, but there's another part that thinks, you can see the way that society is troubled in other regards, and probably that is going to be necessary at some point. I mean, this is the tension, because ideologically, theoretically, hypothetically, whatever, I am against ID cards. I'm against facial recognition cameras and gait recognition cameras and the surveillance society. But on the other hand, all of the mass immigration and the refugees coming across in the small boats and all the rest of it, you have no idea who anyone is in society anymore. And there is a big part of me wants to feel a bit safer in that scenario as well. So, you're caught in a double bind there. And that's where your paranoia starts coming in, isn't it? And thinking, well, this is why they're doing that. And they're doing that for that reason and that for that reason. And those two things then go into lockstep and you're in China.
And on that note, thank you very much for coming on the show, Simon. It's been what a pleasure. It's always wonderful to talk to you. If people want to find you online, if you've got a tour, Simon is quite literally one of the finest stand-up comedians working at the moment. I highly recommend going to watch his shows.
Thank you. Well, I will tell them what they can see. I'll be in Edinburgh doing an hour-long version of my most recent tour show, which is now coming to an end, called Have We Met? That was a 2-hour show, which I'm condensing back down to an hour. That's at 2:00 in the Caves. And then also in the Caves, my brand new show, Staring at the Sun, which is going to be a little bit more improvisory and possibly changeable. And I'm allowing a certain amount of freedom back into that one. And then I will also mention, because I think listeners and viewers will like this, I'm at the Backyard, home of Unleashed Comedy. I think it's 21st and 22nd of September. I'm recording Have We Met? And also Work of the Devil, my previous show, which is the one where I talked about my strange discoveries and revelations about my own ancestral heritage and DNA tests and so on. And I'm doing those two shows for in front of cameras. So I'd love it if your people came to see that. And then the new show, Staring at the Sun, will be starting to tour from the autumn.
Okay.
So that all the information you need is on my website, thesimonevans.com.
Yeah, I heartily recommend you go check out Simon. He is a fabulous comedian. Guys, thank you so much for watching and listening to the show. Make sure to like, make sure to subscribe, make sure to tell a friend. If you didn't like it, shut your face. And also check out my Substack. Find it on Substack, wherever it is. It's been a pleasure. Take care. See you next week.
Ciao.